Now, what do I want to cover for today? The first thing I want to do is predictions for what will come out in paper 2. All right. So the ones that have ticks over here are the questions that already came out. So what did not come out that I think are likely to come out? You will also notice that there is no rate/speed question. So my prediction, very simple one. You will also notice that there is no quadratic word problem, correct? There is no quadratic word problem and there is no rate and speed question. So in other words, what is going to come out? You combine the two things, you are going to get a quadratic word problem involving speed/rate, which is not very non-standard. Speed, rate, quadratic word problems you all do from Sec 2 until now, so many already. Cannot be, don't know, right? Next, also notice that there was no number pattern question. So I do expect, there was a very basic 2-mark. You can argue that that's a number pattern question, but it's not really a number pattern question. Okay, so I would expect that there will be a number pattern question of some sort. Specifically what number pattern I cannot say for sure. But normally at O levels, they like to test constant difference pattern. If they don't test constant difference, they may test an algebraic equation. So very similar to if you have done the TYS questions, your quadratic word problem is mixed together with a number pattern. If it involves quadratic word problem solving, that is also a possibility. So that is another way that they can test number patterns because they have not tested quadratic application. So the prediction here is either it's a quadratic involving rate, speed, or it's a quadratic involving number pattern. So I suspect that is how they will test your quadratic application. What about matrices? Obviously, it will come out because there is nothing on matrices. So you should expect one long answer question on matrices, maybe for like 8 to 10 marks. You should be happy. I don't think matrix questions generally are very difficult. You will need to know, obviously, everything. Unlikely that they would, if they wanted to test the more basic ones like matrix addition or things like matrix squared, normally those are tested in paper 1. So I would expect the paper 2 matrix question to be your very standard long answer matrix where they give you a scenario and then ask you to go and express all the data into matrices and then go and multiply them. Okay, that is what I would expect to see. So mostly to do with multiplication and word problems. Highly unlikely that you will have matrix addition or subtraction because those are usually not tested in your word problems, but of course you still need to know. Okay, simple interest did not come out, but if they tested compound interest, I don't think that they will test simple interest in paper 2. Money exchange did not come out at all. In short answer, normally they test it in short answer. So the fact that it didn't come out could mean that they will test it in your real world application. The interesting thing about kinematics is that kinematics was not tested at all last year. But if you look at the word, if you look at paper 1, there was also no question involving speed rate, right? So the other possibility, if they don't test you a quadratic word problem involving speed and rate, they will test you kinematics. So I will make sure I go and know my kinematics and especially my kinematics graphs. Because if they didn't test in terms of quadratic, then they could very well test speed and rate in terms of kinematics. That is something very logical to test. Agree? So make sure you go and know your kinematics graphs, your speed time graph, your distance time graph, and make sure you know how to transpose a speed time graph into an acceleration time graph or transpose a speed time graph into a distance time graph and vice versa. Next, there was a circle plus triangle question in paper 1. What was not tested? Polygons was not tested. So very sure that polygons will come out. Now, what else did not come out? Similarity and congruence. There was a bit of question involving similarity for the cone question, but that was it. So in terms of in-depth application of similarity and congruence did not come out at all. So make sure you know how to prove triangles are similar. Make sure you know how to prove triangles are congruent. And make sure you know that, and make sure you know the properties of similar and congruent figures. Metric properties of circles was not tested. They tested a little bit about the circle, but that's it. So expect your geometric properties of circles to be tested. Do not be surprised to see questions involving overlapping circles or overlapping portions of circles. In other words, overlapping sectors of circle. So one big sector, one small sector, and in between, there may be a triangle involved. Okay, that is what I think Cambridge would likely test. So questions involving different circles that are overlapping with different radiuses, and then in between there are triangles. That's how I think they will test geometric properties of circles. Confirm there will be a trigonometry question because sine rule, cosine rule not tested at all yet. They tested a bit of bearings. Bearings, again, can be tested in questions involving sine rule, cosine rule. Notice that there are no three-dimensional figures, correct or not? There was nothing involving three-dimensional figures. So expect 3D figures to be tested. So your angle of elevation, angle of depression, so on and so forth. Make sure you know them. All right. By the way, 3D figures can be tested in real-world application. Manduration, even though it has been tested, it will be tested again in paper 2-1. Okay, don't think that manduration test before already because got cone, got, what is that? Cone and cuboid, is it? What's the other shape at the bottom? Was it a cylinder? Cone and cylinder. Correct? Cone and cylinders tested doesn't mean that they cannot test other figures. You still have your spheres and things like that. So normally paper 1 and paper 2 will test manduration in both sets of questions. All right, so expect questions on manduration to still come up. Also notice that radian measure was not tested at all, so expect something involving radian. Now, and this is where it gets even fun, even more fun. Maybe not for you all. You will notice that coordinate geometry was entirely not tested. So they already tested vectors, right? They are going to test vectors again. And they are going to test vectors involving coordinate geometry. If you look at last year's O-level paper, paper 1 got vectors. So a lot of students say paper 1 got vector already, and it was quite significant. I think paper 1 vectors was like 6 marks last year. They are like, oh, that means vectors won't come out for paper 2. Well, guess what? Okay. So I expect them to test vectors again in paper 2, and I expect them to test vectors together with coordinate geometry. Because that is very logical to test together. And as part of it, because of coordinate geometry, you can test similar triangles. So that is my prediction. There is a question involving vectors plus coordinate geometry plus similar triangles. They tested mean mode median a little bit. Cumulative frequency was tested. Calculations for group data was tested. Box and whisker was tested. Would they still test some sort of data analysis? Yes, probably. Okay, so one of the other diagrams that are not tested, normally they would like to test them and leave lah. Okay, so what can they test you? I expect a question involving statistical diagram of some form plus probability. All right, there was only 1 mark of probability question. So obviously they are going to test probability still. That goes without saying. So I will expect a question involving statistical diagram plus probability to be tested. There is one other form of probability question that also falls under a section that was not tested. So possibly to test probability plus quadratic as well. So make sure you know your probability tree or possibility tree. Make sure you know how to do your tree diagram and make sure you know how to find unknowns in your tree diagram. So that would wrap my predictions, what I think your paper 2 is likely to entail.